Sacred connections, true soulmates, are unbreakable pacts. This is a truth the moon goddess herself revealed to all werewolf kind. Yet, when one is publicly disavowed before the entire pack, the lesson learned is that even divine affiliations hold no sway against an alpha's inflated ego. The formal ceremony was intended to be a private affair, a quiet moment between fated partners where Lyra would meekly accept Alpha Cade's decision and vanish into anonymity just like countless other rejected she-wolves before her. However, Lyra harbored a different agenda. Standing in the heart of the Grand Council Hall, encircled by the most influential werewolves in the realm, she felt the mate bond burn within her chest like incandescent silver. Every fiber of her being urged her to submit, to lower her head and quietly resign herself to her destiny. Instead, she raised her chin higher. I, Lyra Nightshade, acknowledge your rejection, Alpha Cade Blackthorn, she proclaimed, her voice resonating with unnatural clarity throughout the marble chamber. However, I return your rejection. The subsequent gasps were audible even above the crackle of the ceremonial bonfires. In 300 years of werewolf jurisprudence, no spurned mate had ever dared utter such words to an alpha. But Lyra's declaration was not yet complete. Chapter 1, The Ordinary Wolf Amidst Titans. Just 3 days prior, the Nightshade Pack was nothing more than a neglected outpost on the fringe, the kind of place where discarded wolves and outcasts eked out an existence, far removed from the glittering metropolises of the werewolf kingdom. Lyra had always been acutely aware of her standing. The offspring of fallen warriors, the descendant of renegades, she carried a lineage so diluted that her wolf form manifested as a pale gray, a stark contrast to the rich ebony and russet hues that signified true nobility. At 22 years of age, she had never transformed into anything larger than an average-sized wolf, had displayed no remarkable talents, and certainly had never anticipated drawing the attention of anyone of consequence, making the arrival of the royal entourage all the more astonishing. "They are here for the moonstone ceremony," her adoptive mother, Alina, had whispered, as they observed the procession of obsidian vehicles winding through their humble village. "The king himself will preside over the annual revelation of mate bonds." Lyra watched from the confines of their dilapidated kitchen window, as wolves clad in immaculate uniforms disembarked from vehicles that likely surpassed the collective annual revenue of their entire pack. At the epicenter of it all, commanding effortless attention, stood Alpha Cade Blackthorn. Even from such a distance, Lyra felt a peculiar stirring within her chest, a warmth that had no connection to the summer heat, but was deeply intertwined with an impossible recognition that resonated through her very soul. Mate, she had scoffed at the sheer absurdity of it all. Lyra Nightshade, utterly unremarkable in every conceivable aspect, destined for the most formidable alpha in the kingdom. The moon goddess must be orchestrating some cosmic jest. But when Cade's head suddenly swiveled in her direction across the village square, when those storm-gray eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that rendered her knees weak, she knew the bond was undeniably real. And judging by the immediate shift in his expression from recognition to utter disdain, she also understood his precise assessment of it. "A mistake?" she had overheard him murmur to his beta as they were formally introduced that evening at the ceremonial banquet. The moon goddess must have erred. Lyra spent the subsequent 2 days observing Cade's interactions with her pack, witnessing the barely concealed contempt in his gaze. Every time he was compelled to acknowledge her existence, she noted how he charmed the other unwed females, wolves possessing distinguished bloodlines and impressive abilities, who would be fitting consorts for an alpha of his stature. She also observed the way he would look at her when he believed she was not paying attention, the raw hunger in his stare when the mate bond flared between them, the way his hands would clench into fists when she was near, as if he were battling an overwhelming urge to reach for her. The bond was undeniable. The attraction was palpable, but his pride proved stronger than both, leading them to this very evening. The formal moonstone ceremony, where all mate bonds discovered during the king's visit would be officially sanctioned or formally renounced. Lyra had anticipated his course of action. She had perceived it in Cade's cold, professional demeanor throughout the day. She had felt it in the way he deliberately avoided making direct eye contact with her, the manner in which he positioned himself as far from her as possible during the pre-ceremony rituals. She had entered the throne room, prepared to graciously accept his dismissal, to lower her head and fade away as a nameless nobody should. But as she stood there, witnessing Cade publicly declare his rejection before hundreds of witnesses, observing the smug expressions on the faces of the noble wolves who had always believed she was an anomaly, something within her fractured, not her heart, which had been steadily breaking for days, but her fear. For the very first time in her existence, Lyra Nightshade ceased to concern herself with the opinions of others, and it seemed that when one relinquished the need to conform, one discovered a reservoir of power far exceeding any prior estimations. Chapter 2. The Illusion of Hope. The silence that ensued Lyra's counter-rejection stretched taut, like a wire on the verge of snapping. King Aldrich himself remained frozen upon his throne, his ancient eyes widened with an emotion that could have been either shock or admiration. The assembled nobility exchanged glances between Lyra and Cade, as if observing a tense tennis match where the ball had suddenly ignited. Cade's countenance became utterly impassive, a dangerous calm that presaged either complete capitulation or utter annihilation. "You," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "you cannot reject me in return. That is not how this procedure functions." Lyra felt an untamed and reckless sensation unfurling within her chest. Perhaps it was the mate bond finally succumbing to strain, or perhaps it was 22 years of invisibility finally reaching its breaking point. Regardless, a smile graced her lips. "Actually," she stated, turning her gaze towards the venerable werewolf law compendiums displayed on a pedestal adjacent to the king's throne. According to the original moon goddess statutes, any mate bond acknowledged by both parties may be dissolved by either individual. The fact that the majority of rejected wolves opt not to reciprocate does not preclude their capacity to do so. A wave of murmurs swept through the assembly. Lyra could discern several court scholars frantically consulting their own copies of the law books, their expressions shifting from surprise to astonishment with each passing second. She is correct," stammered the head scholar, a gaunt wolf named Marcus, whose demeanor suggested he would have preferred any other venue. "The reciprocal rejection clause is indeed extant. It has merely never been invoked because no one has ever been sufficiently reckless to attempt it." Cade finished, his voice dangerously quiet, yet something had perceptibly shifted in the room's atmosphere. What had commenced as a mortifying public repudiation had now transformed into something entirely different, a legal challenge that even the sovereign could not disregard. "Fascinating," King Aldrich remarked slowly, leaning forward on his throne. His voice carried the gravitas of centuries, and when he spoke, all attention was riveted. "In 300 years of my reign, I have never witnessed a reciprocal rejection. Pray tell, young Nightshade, do you comprehend the gravity of your recent declaration?" Lyra's newfound fortitude wavered slightly under the king's intense scrutiny, but she compelled herself to stand straighter. "I have rejected the wolf who rejected me, your majesty. Nothing more, nothing less." "Nothing more," Cade echoed, stepping closer, and Lyra could feel the palpable fury emanating from him in waves. "You have defied the natural order. Alphas are not rejected by wolves of your caliber." "You are correct," Lyra countered. "Alphas are not typically rejected by anyone because the vast majority of wolves are too intimidated to exercise their inherent, goddess-given rights. But I am not the majority." The falsehood flowed so effortlessly that she almost convinced herself of its veracity. The reality was that she was paralyzed by terror. Her heart pounded so violently she was certain everyone in the room could hear its frantic rhythm. Yet she was also consumed by an incandescent rage, a fury more profound than she had ever experienced. An anger, she was discovering, was considerably more potent than fear. This is unprecedented, King Aldrich mused, his eyes gleaming with an amusement that was entirely new since her entrance into the council hall. Marcus, what does the law stipulate regarding reciprocal rejections? The head scholar cleared his throat nervously. According to the ancient texts, Your Majesty, when both parties formally sever the mate bond, it establishes a state termed severed bond status. Both individuals are then considered legally liberated to pursue other mates without any obligation to their former bond partner. Intriguing. The king's eyes sparkled with an intensity that caused Lyra's wolf instincts to prickle with a primal warning. And what of compensation? Compensation? Lyra and Cade inquired in unison. Oh, indeed, King Aldrich smiled, revealing teeth that remained remarkably sharp despite his advanced age. The severed bond status mandates compensation to be rendered by the party who initiated the rejection sequence. As Alpha Cade spoke first, he allowed the implication to linger in the air. Color drained from Cade's face. Your Majesty, surely you cannot be serious. The Blackthorn Pack's assets are substantial. Precisely, the king's smile widened, which renders this all the more compelling. Tell me, Miss Nightshade, are you acquainted with the customary compensation for a severed mate bond? Lyra's mouth felt parched. She had been fueled by sheer adrenaline and righteous indignation, but she had not considered the implications beyond the immediate act of rejecting Cade. The notion that there might be legal ramifications that would benefit her, had not even crossed her mind. I confess, Your Majesty, I am unfamiliar with the specific details. The rejected party is entitled to claim equivalent status compensation, Marcus read from his tome, his voice gaining confidence as he re-established his footing in familiar legal territory. This signifies that if an alpha rejects a mate and that mate reciprocates, the rejected party acquires the right to claim alpha status and territory equivalent to what they would have received through the mate bond. The throne room erupted in shocked whispers. Lyra felt her knees weaken as the full magnitude of the situation dawned upon her. You mean, she began. I mean, King Aldrich stated, his ancient eyes twinkling with a mischievous glint, that you, Lyra Nightshade, have just legally secured the right to your own alpha territory. Congratulations, my dear. You have transitioned from a rejected mate to a pack leader within the span of a single discourse. The look of utter horror etched on Cade's face was almost commensurate with the heart seizure she was currently experiencing. Almost. If narratives like Lyra's serve as a reminder that intrinsic worth cannot be extinguished by cruelty, then subscribe to join others who believe that latent strength deserves recognition. Chapter 3. The Treachery. The jubilation within Lyra's spirit lasted a mere 14 seconds. That was the extent of Cade's recovery from his initial shock, and his subsequent recollection that he was an alpha who had never suffered defeat, whether political or otherwise, in his entire existence. Your Majesty, Cade declared, his voice as smooth as silk and twice as perilous. While I appreciate the pedagogical value of this legal maneuver, I believe we are overlooking a crucial detail. King Aldrich raised an eyebrow. The reciprocal rejection law stipulates that both parties must possess equal standing when the bond is acknowledged. Cade's smile was sharp enough to cleave glass. Miss Nightshade may have been born into the Nightshade Pack, but she is no longer an official member. Lyra's blood turned to ice. What do you mean? I mean, Cade continued, dramatically extracting a document from his inner jacket with theatrical flair, that 3 hours ago, your pack leader, Lyra Nightshade, formally expelled you from the pack for conduct unbecoming of pack loyalty. The paper rustled as he unfolded it, and even from across the hall, Lyra could discern Elena's signature at the bottom, her adoptive mother's signature, authorizing her exile. The expulsion was officially filed with the Royal Registry, Cade announced, his voice gaining strength as he sensed his impending victory. This afternoon, which means that when you attempted to reciprocate my rejection, you were no longer a recognized pack member. You were a rogue wolf, and rogue wolves possess no legal standing to invoke reciprocal rejection rights. The throne room seemed to spin around Lyra as the full scope of the trap became devastatingly apparent. This had not been a spontaneous act of humiliation. This had been meticulously planned, meticulously orchestrated. Elena, the woman who had raised her, who had called her daughter for 17 years, had betrayed her for political favor with the most influential alpha in the kingdom. Elena, Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible above the renewed murmurings of the crowd. She could now see her adoptive mother standing near the rear of the throne room, tears streaming down her face, yet she offered no denial, no protest against the document, no claim of forgery. She simply stood there, shedding silent tears that felt like daggers piercing Lyra's heart. "The expulsion is properly documented," Marcus confirmed after a thorough examination of the papers, his voice tinged with an emotion that might have been sympathy. "Filed at 3:47 p.m. today, with 2 witness signatures and the official pack seal, which means," Cade stated triumphantly, "that Miss Nightshade's attempted rejection holds no legal validity. She spoke as a rogue, and rogues are ineligible to invoke mate bond law. The original rejection stands without any requirement for compensation." King Aldrich studied the document for a prolonged moment, his expression unreadable. Lyra held her breath, clinging to a desperate hope that the ancient monarch might discover some overlooked loophole, some technicality that could shield her from this public devastation. Instead, he nodded slowly. "The law is unequivocal. Without pack standing, a reciprocal rejection is impossible." His gaze met Lyra's across the room. "I regret, child. You played the game skillfully, but you were outmaneuvered before it even commenced." The defeat was crushing, but it was the betrayal that truly shattered her. Lyra looked once more at Elena, the woman who had discovered her as a 5-year-old orphan and pledged to cherish her as her own. The woman who had taught her to read, who had bandaged her scraped knees, who had comforted her through nightmares, and assured her of her inherent worthiness of love. The woman who had, quite literally, offered her up to the wolves in a bid to curry favor with Alpha Cade. "Why?" Lyra implored, her voice breaking on that single, desperate word. Elena finally spoke, her words barely a whisper, yet carrying with unnerving clarity throughout the silent throne room. "He promised to safeguard the pack," she confessed. If I assisted him in circumventing the political complexities of rejecting his mate, he would guarantee the security of our territory. Our people would be safe." "Our people," Lyra echoed hollowly, "but not me." "You were never truly one of us," Elena stated, each word a distinct stab. "Your bloodline, your strength. We all knew you would never truly belong. This way, at least your sacrifice holds some meaning. At least the pack endures." The brutal pragmatism of it was astonishing. To trade one seemingly expendable pack member for the protection of dozens. From a purely utilitarian perspective, it was the astute decision. From a human perspective, it was the kind of betrayal that could shatter a soul. Lyra felt something within her chest fracture and disintegrate, not her heart, which had already been broken by Cade's initial rejection, but something far deeper. The part of her that had always harbored the belief that if she merely tried hard enough, if she was good enough, quiet enough, she might eventually earn her rightful place in the world. That part perished then and there, upon the marble floor of the throne room, witnessed by hundreds who now regarded her with a mixture of pity and second-hand embarrassment. "Well then," she said, her voice surprisingly steady for someone whose entire world had just crumbled, "I suppose that concludes the matter." She turned to face Cade, who was observing her with an expression that could have been satisfaction or perhaps regret. It was difficult to ascertain, and Lyra discovered she no longer cared. "Congratulations, Alpha," she said with a slight bow. "You have prevailed. I trust the endeavor was worthwhile." She began to move towards the throne room doors, intending to depart with whatever shred of dignity she could salvage. Perhaps she would seek out a precipice and contemplate whether leaping from it would be less agonizing than enduring this level of humiliation. However, King Aldrich's voice halted her progress before she had taken 3 steps. "Miss Nightshade," the ancient monarch called, his voice carrying a peculiar undertone of anticipation. "Before you depart, There is one further piece of information you should possess. Lyra turned back, too emotionally depleted to register either hope or apprehension. The king smiled, and this time his expression held a distinctly predatory quality. While you may be unable to invoke reciprocal rejection rights as a rogue, he continued, there exists one additional legal recourse available to you. Your Majesty, Marcus interjected, a note of confusion in his voice. The right of challenge, King Aldrich stated simply. Any wolf who has been wronged by an alpha may invoke the ancient right to challenge them for dominance. If you win, you gain all that they would have forfeited in reciprocal rejection compensation. If you lose, he shrugged eloquently. Lose, and you perish, Cade finished, his voice tight with an emotion that might have been apprehension. Precisely, the king's eyes gleamed. Tell me, Miss Nightshade, are you familiar with the right of challenge? Lyra's mouth was too dry to articulate a response, so she simply shook her head. It's quite straightforward, really, King Aldrich explained conversationally. Single combat, no weaponry, no aid, no quarter. The challenged party dictates the time and method of combat, but it must transpire within 7 days of the challenge being issued. The victor claims all. He leaned forward on his throne, and for the first time that evening, he appeared genuinely invested in the outcome. The pertinent question is, do you possess the fortitude to issue such a challenge, or will you withdraw and live with the knowledge that you permitted them to destroy you without a fight? The throne room held its collective breath. Even Elena had ceased her weeping, her gaze fixed on Lyra with wide, terrified eyes. Cade, for his part, resembled a man observing a mouse contemplating an assault on a feline. Confident in the inevitable outcome, yet surprised by the potential audacity, Lyra surveyed the room, her eyes meeting the gazes of all those present. Noble wolves who had never known the sting of hunger or rejection. Powerful alphas who had been born into their inherent strength. Court officials who served at the pleasure of kings and never had to question their future security. None of them could comprehend the sensation of having absolutely nothing left to lose. But Lyra was about to enlighten them. Chapter 4. Exile commences. I, Lyra Nightshade, invoke the right of challenge against Alpha Cade Blackthorn. The words escaped her lips before her rational mind could intercede. They hung in the air like a death warrant, which realistically they likely were. The reaction was instantaneous and tumultuous. Half of the throne room gasped in astonishment, while the other half erupted into animated whispers. Someone in the rear actually emitted a high, disbelieving laugh, a sound that sliced through the chaos like a blade. Cade stared at her as if she had suddenly developed a second head. You cannot be serious. Utterly serious, Lyra replied, surprised by her own composed tone. Internally, her wolf was pacing frantically, whimpering about the sheer lunacy of challenging an alpha who could likely crush her neck with a single hand. But the human aspect of her, the part that was weary of being insignificant, fearful, and forgettable, felt a peculiar sense of peace. This is madness, Elena whispered from her position near the back wall. Lyra, please, just withdraw. You have made your statement. Have I? Lyra turned to face her former pack leader, her former maternal figure, her former everything. What statement, Elena? That I am precisely as weak and worthless as everyone always assumed? That you were justified in disposing of me like damaged livestock? That's not what you intended. Lyra's voice resonated with an unexpected power. You implied that I was disposable, that my life, my well-being, my future held no significance compared to your political expediency. She faced King Aldrich again, who observed the unfolding events with the evident delight of someone witnessing a surprisingly captivating spectacle. Your Majesty, Lyra declared, I formally petition you to officiate my challenge. Observed and accepted, the king responded without hesitation, clearly relishing the unfolding drama. Alpha Blackthorn, you are legally obligated to respond. Do you accept the challenge? Cade surveyed the room, as if seeking an explanation for how his meticulously planned evening had taken such a drastic turn. His second in command, a burly wolf named Derek was making frantic signals to abort the mission from the periphery. "She's an untamed wolf with no pack discipline," Cade finally stated. "She's never even engaged in a genuine conflict. This isn't a challenge, it's an act of facilitated self-destruction." "Nevertheless," King Aldrich chirped, "the law is absolute. You must either accept the challenge or officially acknowledge her as your superior and provide the restitution she initially demanded." The ensuing silence was profound. Lyra could practically perceive Cade's mental calculations as he weighed his alternatives. Accept the challenge and risk appearing as a brute who preyed on defenseless rogues for amusement, or concede and lose face before the entire supernatural political elite. "Very well," he conceded, his voice strained with suppressed rage. "I accept, but I dictate the terms of engagement." "Naturally," Lyra murmured. 7 nights hence, at the Moonrise Arena. Combat will involve our true forms, with no armaments. The fight concludes with submission, or—" he paused, offering her one final opportunity to withdraw, "or death." "Agreed." The word emerged steadier than Lyra felt, and then it solidified. King Aldrich announced, clapping his hands together with palpable satisfaction. "Let the records reflect that Lyra Nightshade has invoked her right of challenge against Alpha Cade Blackthorn, with combat to occur within 7 days. Until then, both parties are under royal protection and shall not be harmed or impeded by any other entity." He rose from his throne, a clear indication that the evening's proceedings had concluded. "The court is adjourned. I eagerly anticipate next week's festivities." As the assembled nobility began to depart the throne room, their excited chatter focused on the unprecedented drama they had just witnessed. Lyra found herself standing alone in the center of the marble expanse, beginning to grasp the full magnitude of her commitment. 7 days to prepare for a confrontation with one of the kingdom's most formidable alphas. 7 days to somehow acquire sufficient strength to endure a battle with a wolf who had undergone combat training since childhood. 7 days to devise a strategy to avoid being dismembered before hundreds of onlookers. 7 days to live, Lyra. Elena's voice was small and strained as she approached. "What I ought to have done years ago," Lyra responded without turning. "I stopped allowing others to determine my worth." "He will kill you?" "Probably." Lyra finally turned to face the woman who had raised her. "But at least I will die as myself, rather than existing as whatever convenient fiction you and Cade required me to be." Elena's face crumpled. "I never desired this. I thought if you simply accepted the dismissal without protest, you could begin anew elsewhere. Find a small pack willing to take you in. Perhaps find happiness with someone more appropriate." "More appropriate?" Lyra let out a hollow laugh. "You mean weaker? Someone who wouldn't encourage me to aspire beyond my station?" "I meant someone who could love you without destroying you," Elena whispered. For a fleeting moment, Lyra's anger softened. She saw the genuine anguish in Elena's eyes, the regret that had arrived too late to alter anything. A part of her, the part that had been a daughter for 17 years, yearned to forgive, to comprehend, to salvage something from the ruin of their relationship. But then she recalled standing in the same throne room just 20 minutes prior, hearing Elena confirm her expulsion without the slightest attempt at defense. She remembered the meticulous planning that had ensured Lyra's humiliation was as absolute as possible. "If you had loved me," Lyra stated quietly, "you would never have signed that expulsion decree. Love is not accompanied by political calculations, Elena. What you felt for me was, at best, a convenient affection." She turned and proceeded towards the throne room doors, where a small contingent of royal guards awaited to escort her to the provisional accommodations for challengers facing doom. "Lyra, wait!" Elena's voice was laced with desperation. "Where will you go? How will you prepare? You cannot face him alone." Lyra paused at the threshold, her hand resting on the immense wooden door. "I have been alone my entire existence," she said, not looking back. "I have simply ceased pretending otherwise." The doors swung shut behind her with a sound like thunder, cutting off Elena's response and sealing Lyra's destiny. The captain of the royal guard, a battle-hardened wolf named Commander Hayes, was waiting in the corridor, his expression a blend of professional decorum and sincere empathy. "Miss Nightshade," he stated formally, "His Majesty has arranged quarters for you in the Tower of Contemplation. You will have access to training facilities and a modest library. Is there anything specific you require for your preparation?" Lyra almost scoffed at the carefully chosen euphemism. Preparation? As if 7 days of training could somehow level the playing field between her and an alpha bred for dominance. "Actually," she said, surprising herself, "there is something. I need to know everything you possess regarding Alpha Blackthorn's fighting style, his vulnerabilities, his preferred tactics, anything that might grant me even the slightest edge." Commander Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Planning to fight unfairly?" "Planning to survive," Lyra corrected. "And if that necessitates fighting unfairly, then I shall become the dirtiest fighter you have ever witnessed." The commander's weathered face broke into the first genuine smile Lyra had observed all evening. "Now that," he said, "sounds like the demeanor of a wolf who might actually make this interesting." Chapter 5. The Opportunity. The Tower of Contemplation was precisely as bleak as its name suggested. Integrated into the eastern rampart of the royal castle, it had traditionally housed prisoners of noble birth, wolves whose transgressions warranted confinement, but whose lineage was too valuable for summary execution. The circular stone chamber contained a single window, a solitary bed, a modest desk, and an oppressive silence that amplified one's awareness of mortality. Lyra had been gazing at the ceiling for 3 hours when a knock sounded. "Enter," she called, assuming it was a servant bearing her evening repast or another stack of combat manuals, unlikely to serve her against an alpha who could probably bench press a compact vehicle. Instead, Commander Hayes entered the room, followed by a figure that caused Lyra's breath to catch in her throat. The woman appeared ancient, not in the weary, weathered manner of the elderly human, but with the timeless, formidable aura of predators who had survived centuries through sagacity rather than sheer might. Her silver hair was intricately braided with small bones and dark stones, and her eyes held a depth of knowledge gleaned from observing the rise and fall of empires. "Miss Nightshade," Commander Hayes announced formally, "may I introduce Oracle Vera Moon Whisper, custodian of the ancient traditions, and advisor to 3 generations of monarchs." Lyra hastily stood, suddenly conscious of her presence in the company of werewolf royalty. Oracle Vera was legendary, the last of the ancient shamans who recalled magic from before the Great Suppression, a time when werewolves possessed powers beyond mere shape-shifting. "Your Majesty," Lyra stammered, then corrected herself. "I mean Oracle. My apologies. I am unaware of the proper address." Oracle Vera interrupted, her voice carrying the gravitas of centuries. "In 3 days, you will perish unless something changes dramatically. We have no time for formal etiquette." She moved into the room with fluid grace, settling into the sole chair as if it were a throne. Commander Hayes retreated to the doorway, clearly intending to maintain his vigil. "I have come to extend an offer," the oracle continued, "one that could preserve your life if you possess the courage to accept it." Lyra's heart began to race. What kind of offer? "The kind your great-grandmother would have comprehended." Oracle Vera's eyes gleamed in the candlelight. "Tell me, child, what do you know of your lineage? Your true lineage? Not the diluted narrative Elena provided you concerning failed warriors and forgotten rogues?" Lyra sank back onto the bed. "I know nothing of my true lineage. Elena found me when I was 5. I recall nothing from before then." "Of course you don't. Memory suppression was integral to the binding spell." The oracle leaned forward, scrutinizing Lyra's face with an unsettling intensity. "But bindings weaken over time, particularly under extreme emotional duress. Tell me, have you noticed anything unusual in the past few days? Dreams, perhaps? Fleeting images that feel like memories but could not possibly be yours?" Lyra's mouth grew parched. "How did you—" "Because I enacted the original binding 20 years ago at the behest of a dying woman who wished to protect her granddaughter from enemies who would destroy her for her heritage." Oracle Vera's expression softened slightly. Your given name is not Lyra Nightshade, child. It is Lyra Silverblood, the sole surviving heir of the moon's crown lineage. The room tilted around Lyra as memories she had dismissed as peculiar dreams suddenly snapped into sharp focus. A woman with silver hair singing ancient lullabies. A man with eyes like starlight teaching her to summon wolves from the mountains. A conflagration and screams, and someone thrusting her into a cavern while shouting about protective enchantments and hidden bloodlines. The moon's crown lineage, she whispered. But that is extinct. Everyone knows the Silverbloods were eradicated during the Purge Wars. Everyone knows what we intended them to know, Oracle Vera corrected. Your grandmother, Isabella Silverblood, was the most formidable Alpha Queen in werewolf history. She could command wolves across entire territories, could transform into forms that are the stuff of legends, and could wield magic that made the very earth tremble. She was also astute enough to recognize that such power attracts peril, so she concealed me. She perished protecting you, the oracle stated softly, along with the rest of your family. When the coalition of lesser alphas decreed that the silver bloodline had become too potent to permit its continuation, you were 5 years old, the sole survivor, hidden away under binding spells designed to suppress your abilities until you were of an age to claim them safely. Lyra felt as though she were drowning. You're saying I'm... what? Some kind of clandestine werewolf princess? I am stating that you are the genetic descendant of the most powerful supernatural bloodline in recorded history, and that your abilities have been artificially suppressed for 2 decades. Oracle Vera stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlit courtyard. I am also stating that those bindings are beginning to fray, and in 3 days, you will require every conceivable advantage. But if I am so powerful, why have I not sensed it? Why am I still merely... Because power without discipline is merely dangerous potential. The oracle turned back to face her. Which brings me to my proposal. I can dismantle the binding spells tonight. I can grant you access to your complete heritage, your full capabilities, everything your bloodline should have bestowed upon you from birth. Lyra's heart pounded against her ribs. What's the stipulation? Oracle Vera smiled, revealing teeth that were unnervingly sharp. Astute observation. The stipulation is that 20 years of suppressed power, unleashed all at once, will either prove fatal or transform you into something beyond current werewolf comprehension. There is no middle ground, no partial awakening. You will either endure the transition and become what you were destined for, or you will perish in the process. And if I decline the offer, Lyra stated, her voice barely a whisper, then I face Alpha Blackthorn with the abilities of an ordinary rogue wolf, and I will perish approximately 30 seconds after the combat commences. The choice, presented in such stark terms, didn't feel like much of a choice at all. What would I become? Lyra asked. If I survived the transition, what precisely would I be? Oracle Vera's expression became distant, as if she were perceiving something far beyond the stone confines of the tower. You would become what your great-great-grandmother was before the other alphas grew too fearful to allow her to live, she said softly. A true alpha queen, a wolf capable of commanding pack bonds across entire kingdoms, capable of shifting into forms that transcend ordinary werewolf limitations, capable of wielding the ancient magic that shaped the world before humanity developed a fear of the incomprehensible. She paused, meeting Lyra's gaze directly. You would become powerful enough that Alpha Cade Blackthorn would prostrate himself at your feet and beg for the mercy he never afforded you. The image was intoxicating. Lyra could almost visualize it. Cade's expression upon realizing her true nature. Elena's horror upon comprehending what she had discarded. The entire supernatural world discovering that the Silverblood lineage had not, in fact, been extinguished. Yet she could also imagine succumbing to agony as 20 years of suppressed power tore her apart from within. How long do I have to decide? She inquired. The ritual must be performed at midnight on the eve of your challenge, Oracle Vera replied. The moon will be at its zenith. and you will require every advantage the lunar cycle can provide. That leaves you 4 days to make your choice. Continue as you are and perish as an anonymous rogue, or risk everything for the opportunity to reclaim your birthright." She moved towards the door, then paused. "One final consideration, child. Should you opt for the ritual and survive, there will be no turning back. One cannot suppress power once it has been awakened. One cannot feign insignificance and harmlessness after revealing one's true self to the world. You will spend the remainder of your existence as either a sovereign or a target." "And if I am both?" Oracle Vera's smile was as sharp as winter moonlight. "Then the supernatural realm is about to become considerably more engaging." Chapter 6. First Trial. 4 days felt simultaneously fleeting and interminable. Lyra existed in a peculiar liminal state between her former existence and whatever lay ahead. During daylight hours, she trained with Commander Hayes and his most skilled warriors, acquiring fundamental combat techniques that felt laughably inadequate against an Alpha of Cade's caliber. In the evenings, she immersed herself in ancient texts provided by Oracle Vera, journals and spellbooks penned in the old tongue that her suppressed memories were gradually enabling her to comprehend. And during the long, sleepless nights, she grappled with a decision that would either preserve her life or terminate it more spectacularly than Cade ever could. On the third night, she received an unexpected visitor. The knock was soft, almost apologetic. Upon opening the door, Lyra found herself face to face with a young woman approximately her own age. Someone possessing the ethereal beauty characteristic of high-ranking wolf nobility, with golden hair, flawless features, and eyes the color of forest shadows. "Miss Nightshade," the woman said tentatively, "my name is Arya Moonstone. I was slated to be Alpha Cade's chosen mate before you complicated matters." Lyra blinked in surprise. She had overheard whispers about Arya Moonstone, the daughter of the Western Pack's Alpha, blessed with both striking looks and advantageous connections, the kind of perfect union that powerful families arranged for their heirs. "I'm sorry," Lyra said instinctively, then corrected herself. "Actually, no, I'm not sorry. You are better off without him." Arya's laugh was laced with bitterness. "That is precisely why I came to speak with you. You are not the first mate he has rejected." She entered the room uninvited, her nervous energy palpable in the confined space. "May I sit?" Lyra gestured towards the chair, settling back onto the bed herself. "This is complicated." "Complicated how?" "Cade and I have known each other since childhood. Our families always assumed we would eventually mate. Favorable bloodlines, compatible territories, all the usual political advantages." Arya's hands fidgeted in her lap. "But when we both reached maturity and no mate bond manifested, my father still pushed for an arranged mating, a political alliance masquerading as romance. However, Cade refused." "Oh no." Her voice dropped. "He was perfectly willing to proceed until 3 months ago, when he encountered his true mate during a border negotiation." Arya's expression darkened. "A stunning beta from the Southern Pack named Celeste Ravenclaw. The bond was immediate, potent, undeniable." Lyra felt a chill settle in her stomach. "What happened to her?" "The same fate that nearly befell you, except she lacked the fortitude to resist." Arya's voice was devoid of emotion, layered with suppressed fury. "He rejected her publicly, proclaiming her unsuitable for an alpha of his standing. She accepted it with quiet compliance, like a dutiful wolf, and vanished into exile, and then he found me. And then he found you." Arya met Lyra's gaze directly. "Do you wish to comprehend the true reason he rejected you so vehemently? It wasn't because you were insufficient. It was because you were too much. The mate bond between you two was stronger than anything he had ever experienced, stronger even than what he felt for Celeste, and that terrified him." The room fell silent as Lyra absorbed this revelation. Every assumption she had held regarding Cade's motivations, regarding her own inadequacy, suddenly appeared in a different light. "He fears genuine connection," she stated slowly. "He fears losing control. Arya corrected. Cade has spent his entire existence being told he is destined for greatness, that he will unite the werewolf kingdoms through strategic alliances and careful political maneuvering. The concept of being truly vulnerable to another, of needing them in ways he cannot direct or manipulate, it contradicts everything he believes himself to be. Lyra stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlit courtyard where, in less than 24 hours, she would either meet her demise or achieve triumph. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I have spent the last 4 days observing the political repercussions of your challenge," Arya said. "The other alphas are apprehensive, not about the combat itself. Everyone presumes Cade will win easily. They are concerned about what transpires afterward. Arya's voice gained an edge. "Consider this. You have just demonstrated that rejected mates possess more legal rights than anyone previously acknowledged. You have proven that the ancient laws can be invoked by anyone brave enough to utilize them. Word is already disseminating to other packs, other territories." Arya's voice intensified. "There is talk of other rejected wolves coming forward, of challenges being issued against alphas who believe themselves beyond reproach." Lyra turned back to face her visitor. "You believe I have initiated something?" "I believe you have ignited a fuse that has been poised to detonate for decades," Arya stated bluntly, "and I believe the established power structure will resort to any measure to extinguish it before it spreads." She rose and moved towards the door, then paused. "There is something else you ought to know. Cade is not planning to fight honorably." Lyra's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "I mean he has been conferring with a combat enhancer named Victor Shadowbane, an individual specializing in augmenting alpha capabilities for critical engagements." Arya's expression was grim. "It's not precisely against the law, seeing as the enhancements originate from natural wolfman hormones, but it's certainly not considered fair play. So, he gets to be supernaturally empowered, and I'm destined to meet a natural end. That is, unless you can uncover some advantages of your own." Arya reached into her jacket and produced a small, worn, leather-bound book. This once belonged to Celeste Ravenclaw. She abandoned it when she went into self-imposed exile, and I surmised you might find it beneficial. Lyra accepted the journal, sensing the accumulated weight of hidden knowledge within its aged cover. What secrets does it hold? It contains everything she discovered about Cade during their limited time together. His combat strategies, his vulnerabilities, his deepest anxieties. Arya offered a grim smile. It turns out that rejected mates are remarkably effective at gathering intelligence. She moved once more toward the exit, then paused for a final word. "I know. Lyra, whatever your intentions for tomorrow evening, whatever edge you believe you possess, exercise caution. The political ramifications, if you were to actually triumph, are immense. There are many among the werewolf community who would rather see you deceased than witness a shift in the established hierarchy. Do you count yourself among them?" Arya's smile was as keen as a freshly honed blade. "My dear, my entire existence has been defined by being told my sole worth lay in being breeding stock for potent alphas. If you possess the ability to dismantle that entire system and construct something superior in its place, you have my unreserved backing." After Arya departed, Lyra sat on her bed, Celeste's journal resting in her lap, hesitant to delve into its contents. A part of her recoiled from the prospect of learning Cade's secrets. She didn't want to understand him any better than she already did. It was simpler to harbor animosity towards someone when they remained an enigma. However, simplicity wouldn't guarantee her survival on the morrow. She opened the journal and began to read. Day 1. I encountered my mate today, Alpha Cade Blackthorn of the Northern Territories. The connection struck me with the force of a lightning bolt. I've never experienced anything so profound. He appeared equally affected, yet there was a discernible apprehension in his eyes. Fear? Why would an alpha be apprehensive of his own mate? Day 3. Cade consistently avoids being alone with me. When we are together, he is charming but detached, as if he's performing a role rather than being his authentic self. I sometimes catch him observing me, and the raw desire in his gaze elicits a purr from my wolf. But then he averts his gaze and reverts to a cold demeanor. Day 7. I believe I'm beginning to grasp the situation. He isn't afraid of me. He's terrified of the intensity of his own longing, afraid of how the mate bond renders him incapable of self-control. He confided in me this evening that alphas cannot afford to exhibit weakness. They cannot afford to need anyone more than that person needs them. Day 12, he is going to repudiate me. I can discern it in his increasing detachment, in his discourse regarding political imperatives and suitable unions. A portion of me desires to fight for what we have, but I am weary of begging for mere crumbs of affection from someone who perceives love as a deficiency. Lyra closed the journal, her hand trembling slightly. She had anticipated receiving tactical intelligence concerning combat techniques or physical frailties. Instead, she had unearthed something far more perilous: understanding. Cade was not merely a callous alpha who relished the destruction of lesser wolves. He was a man so consumed by the fear of vulnerability that he would sooner obliterate his own happiness than risk being truly known by another. The crucial question remained: would this revelation aid her survival tomorrow night, or would it lead to her demise by causing her to falter at a pivotal moment? Outside her window, the moon was steadily advancing towards its fullness, and Oracle Vera's midnight ultimatum was rapidly approaching. If you are supporting Lyra's survival through the trials ahead, please click subscribe if you haven't already, as the ensuing 24 hours will determine whether justice prevails or power crushes another innocent life. Chapter 7. The Second Trial. Midnight arrived with the distinct sound of footsteps echoing on stone. Lyra had been awake for hours, gazing at the luminous full moon through her confined window, grappling with a decision that would irrevocably shape the remainder of her existence. Oracle Vera's offer lay heavy in her chest. Risk everything for power, or confront Cade with nothing but sheer resolve and perish within mere minutes. When the ancient werewolf entered her confinement, she moved with an effortless fluidity, the mark of someone who had never questioned her place in the world. Have you reached a decision, child? Oracle Vera inquired directly, without preamble. Lyra inhaled deeply. I have some questions first. Naturally you do. Present them with expediency. The moon's potency will peak in under an hour, and every moment will be vital if you opt for the ritual. Should I survive the awakening, what precisely will I transform into? You mentioned I would resemble my great-grandmother, but what does that entail in tangible terms? Oracle Vera settled into a nearby chair, her ancient eyes mirroring the moonlight, much like a predator. Isabella Silverblood possessed the ability to command any werewolf within a 100-mile radius, not to suggest, not to influence, but to command. Their wolves would yield to hers, irrespective of their human mind's desires. She could assume forms unknown to nature. Wolves the size of bears, endowed with strength, capable of pulverizing stone, and speed that gave the illusion of teleportation. She paused, allowing the magnitude of this to register. She could also wield ancient magic, summon storms, heal mortal injuries, and perceive through the senses of any wolf within her dominion. At the zenith of her power, she was, in essence, a solitary force with unparalleled, supernatural intelligence-gathering capabilities, and the other alphas annihilated her because they were gripped by fear. They extinguished her life because she harbored ambitions of uniting all werewolf territories under a singular sovereign, herself. She firmly believed that fragmented, warring packs rendered all werewolves susceptible to discovery and persecution by humans. Her objective was to forge a clandestine nation, a supernatural kingdom that could adequately safeguard its people. Lyra felt a profound chill that had nothing to do with the frigid stone walls surrounding her. She intended to govern them all. She desired to rescue them all. Oracle Vera corrected her. The methods were open to debate, but her objectives were noble, even if her approach was authoritarian. And you believe I would make the same choices? The oracle's smile was inscrutable. I believe you would forge your own path. The pertinent question is whether you will live long enough to make any choices at all. Lyra rose and approached the window, gazing out at the moonlit courtyard where the ensuing night's confrontation was scheduled to unfold. She could discern workers already commencing the setup of the combat arena, a circular expanse intricately marked with ancient sigils, flanked by tiered seating designed to accommodate the hundreds of spectators who would gather to witness her demise. "There is something else," she stated softly. "I have been experiencing dreams, not the suppressed recollections you alluded to. New dreams. Dreams where I stand within that arena, and I am transformed, stronger, yet imbued with an anger, a rage more profound than anything I have ever known. Power amplifies what resides within you," Oracle Vera explained carefully. "If you harbor resentment, awakening your latent abilities will proportionately magnify that rage. What if I cannot control it? What if I become something more dreadful than the alphas who annihilated my family?" The question hung suspended between them, akin to a poised sword ready to descend. Oracle Vera remained silent for a considerable duration, scrutinizing Lyra with an intensity that suggested she could perceive the very depths of her soul. "Do you comprehend the source of your great-grandmother's greatest fortitude?" she inquired finally, her voice low. "Her power or her doubt?" The oracle stood and moved to stand beside Lyra at the window. Isabella harbored reservations regarding every decision, agonized over every choice, and perpetually feared she was metamorphosing into the very entity she had vowed to combat. It was this inherent doubt, this ceaseless self-examination, that preserved her humanity even as she wielded godlike power. She placed a weathered hand upon Lyra's shoulder. "The very fact that you apprehend the possibility of becoming a monstrosity is the most compelling evidence I possess that you will not. Monsters do not concern themselves with their own malevolence." Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the immense pressure of generations weighing down upon her shoulders. Her family's legacy, the survival of her people, her own desperate yearning to demonstrate her value beyond what the world had dictated. "If I undertake this," she stated slowly, "and if I survive both the awakening and the ensuing combat, what transpires next? Do I simply return home? Resume the guise of an ordinary child?" Oracle Vera emitted a laugh, a sound reminiscent of silver bells chiming amidst a winter storm. "If you endure tomorrow night as a fully awakened silverblood, normalcy will forever be an unattainable option. Every alpha in the kingdom will either seek to pledge allegiance to you or endeavor to eradicate you. Every rejected wolf will look to you as either a beacon of salvation or a harbinger of false hope. Every human government will promptly add you to their extraterrestrial threat assessment rosters. You are hardly painting an appealing picture. I am being candid regarding the inherent cost." The oracle's expression turned grave. "Power invariably exacts a toll. The pertinent inquiry is whether you are willing to pay that price to preserve your own existence and, perchance, to reshape the world in the process." Lyra contemplated Elena, shedding silent tears as she surrendered Lyra's life for political expediency. She recalled Cade, so paralyzed by the fear of genuine intimacy that he would rather destroy his own mate than risk exposure. She thought of Celeste Ravenclaw and innumerable other wolves who had been discarded by a system that treated them as expendable. She considered the laborers in the courtyard below, diligently assembling an arena where her quiet demise was anticipated, allowing the established order to persist unaltered. "There is one final piece of information I require," she said. "The ritual, what are the actual probabilities of survival?" Oracle Vera remained silent for such an extended period that Lyra began to suspect she would not receive an answer. Historically, the ancient werewolf stated finally, approximately 1 in 4. But those statistics encompass wolves who attempted the awakening ritual devoid of proper bloodline lineage, without an emotional catalyst, and without the desperate need propelling them forward. And with all those factors, with all those elements, your chances improve to perhaps 1 in 3. Lyra felt a sickening lurch in her stomach. A 67% likelihood of perishing solely from the ritual itself, even before confronting Cade. Yes, but a 100% certainty of death if you face him without it. The mathematics were stark but irrefutable. Perish with near certainty while striving to attain the strength necessary for survival, or perish with absolute certainty as the wolf she currently was. She turned away from the window and met Oracle Vera's ancient gaze directly. What must I do? The oracle's smile was a mixture of pride and trepidation, equally pronounced. Are you assured? Once we commence, there is no possibility of retreat. You will either emerge as one of the most formidable supernatural beings on the planet, or you will expire in a state of agony exceeding any conceivable suffering for a wolf. I am assured. Then let us begin immediately. Remove your attire. The ritual necessitates direct epidermal contact with the lunar luminescence. As Lyra disrobed, Oracle Vera began retrieving items from a leather satchel that appeared to hold far more than its dimensions would logically permit. Crystalline vials filled with a silvery liquid, carved bones that exuded an aura of immeasurable antiquity, a blade with an edge that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The process involves 3 distinct phases, the oracle explained as she meticulously arranged the articles in a precise configuration throughout the confined space. Firstly, I shall dismantle the restrictive enchantments that have suppressed your latent abilities since childhood. This sensation will be akin to your skin being flayed from your very core, delightful. Secondly, your authentic wolf will manifest for the inaugural time. This may entail a physical metamorphosis exceeding conventional shifting. Your great-grandmother's wolf form was singularly unique. This phase typically results in a complete loss of consciousness due to the overwhelming pain. And the third phase, Oracle Vera paused in her preparations, her gaze meeting Lyra's, with what might have been a flicker of compassion. The third phase is the juncture where your human consciousness integrates with your awakened faculties. Should your mind prove incapable of processing the immense power, should the rage, the pain, or the sheer overwhelming sensation shatter your sanity, she gestured eloquently, I shall go mad. You will descend into madness, and I will be compelled to end your life before you can inflict harm upon innocent individuals. Lyra nodded, surprised by the profound sense of calm she felt. Perhaps she was already succumbing to insanity, and the ritual would merely formalize the process. One final inquiry, she said. If I endure all 3 stages, will I still retain my identity? Will I remain Lyra, or will I transform into someone entirely different? Oracle Vera's expression softened. You will still be you, child, merely amplified beyond your wildest imaginings. Outside, the moon reached its apogee, bathing the stone chamber in a cascade of silver light. It is time, Oracle Vera declared, raising the obsidian dagger towards the window. Are you prepared to discover your true essence? Lyra took a deep, resolute breath and stepped into the very center of the ritualistic circle. I am ready. The initial incision drew forth blood that gleamed like liquid starlight within the moonbeams, and the ancient incantations Oracle Vera uttered seemed to resonate with power, causing the very air to vibrate. The unraveling had commenced. Chapter 8. Truth Revealed. The first stage felt akin to being struck by lightning from within. Lyra's scream reverberated off the stone walls as Oracle Vera's blade traced arcane symbols across her arms. Each incision released 2 decades of suppressed power in violent surges. The binding spells shattered like fragile glass. And with each fracture, memories returned with crystalline clarity. A woman with silver hair lifting her towards the celestial expanse. You are the moon's daughter, little wolf. Never forget your true nature. Fire engulfing her childhood home, while her grandmother valiantly battled a dozen assailants simultaneously. Run, little star. Flee and conceal yourself until you possess the strength to reclaim what is rightfully yours. Elena, discovering her in the cavern 3 days later, terrified and utterly alone. I will keep you safe, child, but we must never speak of your past identity. The memories surged with increasing rapidity, 20 years of suppressed identity crashing back in overwhelming waves, leaving her gasping for breath. She recalled her true appellation, her genuine heritage, the lullabies her grandmother had sung in the ancient tongue, melodies that spoke of power, responsibility, and the profound burden of leadership. Stage 1 complete, Oracle Vera announced, her voice sounding distant and strangely altered. Your bindings are severed. Can you comprehend me, child? Lyra attempted to respond, but her voice emerged as a mournful blend of a growl and a sob. The agony was beyond description. Yet beneath it, she could sense something else coalescing. Power, raw, ancient, formidable power that made her skin feel too constricting to contain it. Stage 2 commences now, the oracle cautioned. Endeavor not to resist what is imminent. The metamorphosis initiated within her very bones. Lyra had assumed her wolf form hundreds of times throughout her life, and it had always been a seamless, natural transition, as effortless as breathing. This was entirely dissimilar. This felt as though her skeletal structure was being fundamentally rewritten from the inside out, as if her very DNA was being reforged in celestial fire. Her wolf form, upon its eventual emergence, bore no resemblance to the small, gray creature she had always been. She was immense, easily double the size of any standard werewolf, with fur that shimmered from silver to black like liquid moonlight. Her eyes blazed with an inner inferno, and when she opened her jaws to unleash a howl, the sound reverberated with enough force to shatter every pane of glass in the tower. But it was the third stage that brought her perilously close to oblivion. As her consciousness merged with her newly awakened faculties, Lyra felt her mind expand to encompass an extent she had previously deemed impossible. Suddenly, she could perceive every werewolf within miles, discerning their precise locations, their emotional states, their pack affiliations. She could feel the magnetic pull of their wolves, the instinctive acknowledgement of her superior bloodline that compelled them to submit, even from a considerable distance. She could also sense their pervasive fear. Word of her audacious challenge had rapidly disseminated throughout the supernatural community, and dozens of formidable wolves had converged to witness tomorrow night's spectacle. They were all present now, within the castle and its surrounding environs, and they were all consumed by apprehension regarding what she might become. Excellent, her wolf purred with a savage satisfaction. Let them experience fear. Let them comprehend the folly of underestimating a silverblood. However, it was what she sensed emanating from the royal chambers that sent a shiver of dread down her spine. King Aldrich was not solitary in his private chambers. He was engaged in a clandestine meeting with 3 other alphas, powerful wolves whose territories bordered the kingdom's most strategically vital resources. And they were meticulously plotting to ensure that tomorrow night's challenge concluded with Lyra's demise, irrespective of the outcome of her confrontation with Cade. We cannot permit a silverblood to survive. Alpha Marcus Ironwood's pronouncement carried with stark clarity to her enhanced senses. Should she vanquish Cade, she will acquire a legal claim to his territory and its resources. If she perishes during their duel, she will be elevated to the status of a martyr, potentially inspiring other rejected wolves to rally behind her. Either scenario will fundamentally destabilize the current power structure. The girl must be eliminated. Alpha Vincent Shadow concurred. However, the elimination must appear natural. Perhaps an unfortunate accident during combat, or a cardiac arrest brought on by the immense stress of fighting beyond her capabilities. I have established connections among the arena personnel, Alpha David Stormclaw added. Introducing silver dust into the combat arena will significantly attenuate her wolf's strength, rendering her susceptible to a fatal blow that might otherwise prove ineffective. King Aldrich's ancient voice resonated with thoughtful deliberation. And if she proves more resilient than anticipated, then we shall implement the contingency plan. Alpha Marcus stated grimly, crossbow bolts fired from the spectator galleries will simulate an infiltration by rogue wolf hunters. The kingdom will mourn a tragic attack, and the silver bloodline will be extinguished along with her. Lyra's transformed consciousness reeled from the implications. The challenge itself was rendered utterly meaningless. They had never harbored any intention of allowing her to survive. regardless of whether she emerged victorious or defeated. She was perceived as a threat to be neutralized, not a legitimate combatant to be respected. "They fear us because they comprehend our potential," her wolf snarled. "They recall the capabilities of my grandmother and will not risk history repeating itself." But there was something else within the supernatural currents surrounding the castle, something that caused her newly awakened instincts to prickle with a sense of foreboding. Elena was present. Her former pack leader was residing in one of the guest quarters, and she was not alone. Cade was with her, accompanied by an individual whose psychic signature felt profoundly amiss in ways that made Lyra's enhanced senses recoil. She focused her attention on that particular room, utilizing abilities she was still in the process of comprehending. And what she discovered caused her stomach to churn. The augmentation process is now complete. A voice like the grinding of stones declared, "The Alpha's strength has been tripled. His speed has been doubled. His regenerative capabilities have been accelerated beyond typical werewolf parameters. The girl will not survive 30 seconds of combat. And the side effects?" Elena's voice was small and laced with worry. "Temporary," the stranger assured her. "Heightened aggression, diminished empathy, a potential loss of rational thought during combat, but these effects will dissipate within hours of the enhancer's influence waning." "You are transforming him into a monstrosity," Elena whispered. "I am ensuring that the natural order remains intact." Cade's voice was now altered, harder, more vicious than she had ever heard it. "The silver bloodline will cease to exist tomorrow night, and werewolf society will maintain its equilibrium." Lyra felt her enhanced consciousness processing this information with superhuman alacrity. Cade had been subjected to chemical alterations specifically designed to ensure her demise. The king and his confederates were planning to orchestrate her assassination should she somehow manage to survive the rigged combat. Elena had actively participated in the orchestration of this entire elaborate trap and was now experiencing second thoughts that had arrived 24 hours too late. She was ensnared by adversaries who had meticulously planned her destruction down to the minutest detail. Then let us grant them something truly formidable to fear. Her wolf growled. Let them witness the consequences of cornering a silverblood. Lyra Oracle Vera's voice pierced through her expanding awareness like a sharp blade. Concentrate on my voice. You are losing yourself to the power. Return to me. With immense effort, Lyra withdrew her consciousness from its supernatural expansion and focused on the ancient werewolf kneeling beside her. Oracle Vera's face was pale with apprehension, and Lyra realized she had been unconscious for several minutes while her awakened abilities ran unchecked. I'm back," she managed to articulate. Her voice still resonated with a deep hum that caused the stone walls to tremble. "How are you feeling?" Lyra assessed her newly altered physique and expanded mental faculties. The discomfort had vanished, supplanted by a feeling of potency that was both exhilarating and daunting. She could perceive every pulse within the castle, sense the emotional states of wolves situated miles distant, and direct pack affiliations with a mere thought. She had indeed transformed into precisely what her great-great-grandmother had been, a preeminent predator of the supernatural realm, endowed with capabilities surpassing the typical limitations of a werewolf. "I feel," she began, then faltered as the full ramifications became apparent. "Oracle, they do not intend to allow me to survive tomorrow night, irrespective of whether I prevail in the contest. What do you imply?" Lyra swiftly relayed the details she had overheard, utilizing her heightened senses. Oracle Vera's countenance grew graver with each revelation. "I harbored such fears," the ancient werewolf stated once Lyra had concluded. "The political ramifications of your continued existence are too significant for them to leave to chance. So what course of action do I have? I cannot flee. They would pursue me relentlessly. I cannot conceal myself. They are aware of my identity now. And I cannot contend with all of them. Even with these novel abilities." Oracle Vera remained silent for a considerable duration, observing Lyra with discerning eyes. "There is one possibility," she finally declared. However, it carries immeasurable peril and will fundamentally alter everything. Let us not await tomorrow night's challenge. We shall act this evening, while they still believe you to be weak and unprepared." The oracle's smile was as sharp as the moonlight in winter. "We shall remind the werewolf community why the silver bloodline was so feared as to necessitate their eradication." Lyra felt her enhanced senses stir with anticipation. "What do you propose?" "Revolution, child. Swift, decisive, and utterly terrifying." Oracle Vera rose, power emanating from her ancient form. "It is time to demonstrate to them the consequences of underestimating a wolf with nothing left to lose." Chapter 9. The Final Confrontation. The doors to the throne room were obliterated inward at precisely 2 minutes past midnight. Lyra strode through the shattered wood, with Oracle Vera by her side. Her transformed wolf form radiated a power that made the very air shimmer. The royal guards stationed outside had not even managed to sound an alarm. Her enhanced abilities had subdued them before they could react. King Aldrich looked up from his private consultation with the 3 conspiring alphas, his ancient face registering genuine astonishment for the first time in centuries. "Impossible," Alpha Marcus Ironwood breathed. "The ritual was not scheduled until tomorrow night." "Surprise," Lyra stated, her voice carrying a resonance that made the crystal chandeliers chime like bells. "As it turns out, when you meticulously plan someone's assassination, they tend to take preemptive measures." She shifted back to her human form, a process that now took less than a heartbeat, and stood before them, clad in garments conjured by Oracle Vera through ancient magic. Her silver hair cascaded past her shoulders in waves that seemed to capture and hold the moonlight, and her eyes blazed with a power that made even the king flinch. "La Silver Blood," King Aldrich said slowly, using her true name for the first time. "You have made a grave error by coming here." "Have I?" Lyra stepped further into the chamber, her enhanced senses monitoring every wolf in the castle. "Because from my vantage point, the sole mistake was believing you would uphold the laws you profess to champion." She directed her gaze sequentially to each of the conspiring alphas. "Silver dust in the combat circle, Alpha Stormclaw." "Truly? I anticipated greater ingenuity from someone of your repute." Alpha David paled. "You could not possibly know." "I am aware of everything that transpires within 100 miles of me," Lyra interrupted. "Every whispered conversation, every thumping heartbeat, every desperate scheme to ensure I do not survive long enough to pose a threat to your comfortable power structure." She focused her attention next on Alpha Marcus. "Crossbow bolts from the galleries, disguised as rogue hunters to provide plausible deniability. Tell me, did it ever cross your mind that perhaps, just perhaps, if you must assassinate someone to maintain your authority, you do not deserve that authority in the first place?" "This is treason," Alpha Vincent Shadowmere snarled, beginning to shift. "You dare to threaten us within the king's own—" Lyra's power lashed out like a whip, and suddenly Vincent was frozen mid-transformation, his wolf caught in a state of agonizing suspension between forms. "I am not threatening you," she said softly. "I am providing you with information about what will occur next. You may choose to listen, or you may choose to test whether I am bluffing about my abilities, but I assure you, my great-grandmother could command any wolf within her vicinity. I have inherited that capability, along with several others you have likely forgotten." She released Vincent, who collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. The other alphas retreated several paces. "Your Majesty," Oracle Vera spoke for the first time, her ancient voice carrying the weight of centuries. "The silver bloodline was eradicated because Isabella sought to unify all werewolf territories under a single sovereign. The conspiracy succeeded because you sanctioned it, because you feared losing your own throne to someone more powerful than yourself." King Aldrich's expression hardened. "That was necessary for stability." "Necessary for your continued reign," Oracle Vera corrected. "But now her granddaughter stands before you, awakened and aware of the full extent of your treachery. The question is, what happens next?" The throne room fell into a profound silence as everyone absorbed the implications. Lyra could feel the supernatural currents shifting as wolves throughout the castle became cognizant of her presence and power. Some experienced fear, others curiosity. A select few felt a flicker of what might have been hope. "I am prepared to make you an offer," Lyra said, addressing King Aldrich directly. "One opportunity to resolve this situation without bloodshed. I am listening. You will permit my challenge against Cade to proceed as planned, but with fairness. No enhancements on his part, no assassination attempts on mine, no rigged combat circles. Simply two wolves resolving a legal dispute according to your own laws." She paused, allowing the statement to settle. "If he defeats me legitimately, I will accept the outcome and depart the kingdom forever. And if I prevail, if I win, I will claim the territory to which I am legally entitled, and you will cease treating rejected wolves as disposable refuse." Lyra's voice intensified. "I am not seeking to depose you, nor to unite the kingdoms, nor to re-establish my grandmother's empire. I merely wish to exist without constantly anticipating the next political maneuver aimed at my demise." Alpha Marcus emitted a bitter laugh. "You expect us to believe you will be content with a single territory? That you will not leverage your abilities to expand your influence until you command everything?" "I expect you to uphold your own laws," Lyra retorted, "or to admit that werewolf justice is a fabrication designed to protect the powerful and crush anyone who dares challenge the prevailing order." She turned in a slow circle, addressing not only the conspirators, but every wolf whose enhanced senses were observing this confrontation from elsewhere in the castle. "I am aware that you are all listening. Every alpha, every beta, every wolf who came to witness my demise tomorrow night for your amusement." Her voice carried through pack bonds and supernatural channels, reaching hundreds of listeners simultaneously. "You have been led to believe I am a threat to stability, that I am dangerous, that the silver bloodline deserved extinction. But ask yourselves, who made that determination? Who decreed my lineage too perilous to exist? Who enacted the laws that permit powerful alphas to reject and destroy their mates with impunity?" Her eyes blazed brighter. "It is the same wolves who benefit most from keeping the rest of you in line. The same wolves who are orchestrating my murder tomorrow because they are terrified of what might transpire if you all realize you possess greater power than they have allowed you to believe." The supernatural currents within the castle shifted as her words resonated. She could sense doubts spreading among the assembled wolves. Questions that had been suppressed for generations were now demanding answers. "Your Majesty," she said, turning back to King Aldrich, "you have until dawn to make your decision. Either you honor your laws and allow my challenge to proceed fairly, or I shall invoke my grandmother's legacy and commence operations in the manner she would have employed." "Is that a threat?" "It is a choice." Lyra's smile was sharp. "My grandmother desired to rule through force because she believed werewolves required a firm hand for survival. I would prefer to inhabit a world where justice holds genuine meaning, where legal rights are not mere convenient fictions, behind which the powerful can conceal themselves." She started towards the exit, then paused. "Oh, and one further point. I am aware of the enhancements Cade has received. Whatever that alchemist provided him, it must be reversed before tomorrow night, or the challenge will be forfeited, and I will claim my compensation by default." "You cannot possibly prove—" "I can sense the chemical corruption within his system from here," Lyra interrupted Alpha Marcus. "My abilities encompass the detection of supernatural alterations to wolf physiology. Therefore, either he engages me cleanly, or you will publicly acknowledge that you rigged the challenge and accept the legal repercussions." She proceeded towards the door, with Oracle Vera falling into step beside her. The royal guards automatically stepped aside, their wolves recognizing her superior bloodline, even if their human minds had not yet caught up. "Lyra," King Aldrich's voice halted her at the threshold. "If I agree to your terms, if the challenge proceeds with fairness and you are victorious, what then? What is it that you truly desire?" She glanced back over her shoulder at the ancient monarch who had sanctioned her family's eradication and nearly succeeded in completing the task. "I desire what every rejected wolf desires, Your Majesty, to be perceived as more than a political inconvenience, to have my worth determined by my choices rather than my lineage, or my beauty, or my utility to someone else's aspirations. Her eyes met the gaze of each conspiring alpha in turn. And I want all of you to remember this moment. Remember what transpired when you cornered a silver blood and assumed she would perish quietly, because the next rejected wolf who invokes their rights might not possess the same inclination towards peaceful resolutions as I do. The walk back to her tower felt surreal. Every wolf she encountered sensed her power and either bowed their heads in deference or stared with stunned recognition. By the time she reached her chambers, the entire castle was abuzz with news of her transformation. Oracle Vera followed her inside, her ancient face a mixture of pride and concern. "That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I have ever witnessed," she remarked. "Perhaps both." Lyra collapsed onto her bed, suddenly depleted despite her enhanced capabilities. "Do you believe they will consent to fair terms?" "I believe you have left them with no alternative. If they refuse, you have already exposed their conspiracy to every wolf within listening range. The political repercussions would be catastrophic." Oracle Vera settled into a chair, but added, "Be prepared for them to attempt something subtle. They are cornered now, which makes them desperate." Lyra nodded, her enhanced senses monitoring the supernatural currents throughout the castle. She could discern the frantic arguments between the king and his conspirators, sense Cade's confusion and burgeoning anger as he learned of the night's events, and feel Elena's overwhelming guilt and fear emanating from her guest quarters. And beneath it all, she could perceive something else, a burgeoning wave of hope from the castle's lower-ranking wolves, the servants, guards, and minor pack members who had never dared to challenge the established order, but were now witnessing a rejected wolf confront the most powerful alphas in the kingdom and emerge unscathed. "We have initiated something," her wolf observed, "whether intentionally or not." "Oracle," Lyra said quietly, "what if I am not sufficiently strong for what lies ahead? What if I prevail tomorrow night and then discover I have no idea how to truly lead or effect meaningful change?" The ancient werewolf's smile was gentle. "Then you will learn, child, just as every leader throughout history has learned, by making mistakes, by seeking assistance, and by refusing to yield when faced with adversity." She stood and moved towards the door. "Get some rest. Tomorrow night, you face Cade in a combat that will determine not only your fate, but potentially the future of every rejected wolf in the kingdom." She paused at the threshold. No pressure. After Oracle Vera departed, Lyra lay in the darkness, her enhanced senses attuned to the castle's nocturnal activities. She could sense Cade's chemical enhancements being forcibly purged by royal healers, a painful process from what she could ascertain. She could feel the king's conspirators dispersing to their quarters, their plans hastily revised. She could sense hundreds of wolves throughout the castle, contemplating what the morrow would bring. And in the guest quarters, she could feel Elena weeping herself to sleep, whispering apologies that would never be heard. Lyra closed her eyes, attempting to rest, but sleep eluded her. Tomorrow night would be pivotal. Her future, her freedom, possibly her life. She had transitioned from a powerless rogue to a supernatural apex predator in under 24 hours. And now, hundreds of wolves were observing to see what she would do with abilities that could reshape their entire society. No pressure at all, she mused, staring at the ceiling as dawn approached. Absolutely no pressure. Chapter 10. Resolution. The Moonrise Arena was designed for spectacle, not for impartiality. Lyra stood at the center of the ancient combat circle as thousands of werewolves filled the surrounding tiers, their voices coalescing into a cacophony that would have been overwhelming prior to her transformation. Now, her enhanced senses filtered the din into individual conversations, allowing her to perceive everything from excited wagers on her survival time to hushed speculation about the veracity of the silver blood rumors. The moon hung full and heavy overhead, its luminescence rendering the white marble arena ethereal and deadly. Across the circle, Cade emerged from the Alpha's entrance to thunderous applause. Even stripped of his chemical enhancements, he was magnificent, tall tall and powerful, moving with the predatory grace of someone who had never known defeat. His storm-gray eyes locked onto hers. For a fleeting moment, the mate bond flared between them like lightning. She could feel his confusion, his anger, his grudging admiration for what she had become. And beneath it all, buried so deeply, he likely didn't recognize it himself. King Aldrich stood in the royal box, his ancient voice amplified by magic to carry across the arena. "We convene this evening to witness a legal challenge under the ancient laws," he announced. "Lyra Silverblood, the last heir of the Moon's Crown bloodline, faces Alpha Cade Blackthorn of the Northern Territories. The terms are unequivocal: single combat in shifted form, no weapons, no assistance. Victory is achieved through submission, death, or surrender." He paused, his gaze finding Lyra across the distance. "Let it be known that this challenge proceeds under royal observance with no interference from external parties. The outcome shall be honored by all, irrespective of personal preferences or political considerations." The warning was clear. The conspirators had been instructed to stand down, at least for this night. "Combatants, prepare yourselves," King Aldrich commanded. "On my signal, you may commence." Lyra shifted into her transformed wolf form, feeling power surge through her enhanced body. She was colossal now, nearly twice Cade's size, even in his alpha form, with fur as black as midnight that seemed to absorb moonlight and eyes that blazed with an inner fire. The crowd gasped at the sight. This was no ordinary wolf. This was a creature from legend, a being belonging in ancient tales of the moon goddess herself. Cade shifted as well, his own wolf form imposing, but now appearing almost diminutive in comparison. His black fur bristled with aggression, yet she could sense his uncertainty. This was not the facile victory he had been promised when he agreed to the challenge. This was something entirely different. "Begin!" King Aldrich's voice cracked like a whip. Cade lunged immediately, moving with the speed and precision born of extensive combat training. He aimed for her throat, a killing strike designed to end the contest in mere seconds. Lyra's enhanced reflexes made him appear to move in slow motion. She sidestepped with ease, utilizing her greater mass to knock him off balance with a casual swipe of one massive paw. Cade tumbled across the marble, recovered with impressive agility, and surged at her again. This time she caught him mid-leap, her jaws closing around his shoulder with sufficient force to elicit a yelp of pain, but she did not crush. Not yet. Instead, she hurled him across the arena like a rag doll. The crowd's excited cheers faltered into a murmur of confusion. This was not a fight. It was a display of overwhelming superiority. Cade struggled to his feet, blood matting his fur where her teeth had pierced his shoulder. His eyes were wild now, the calculated strategy of a trained fighter yielding to desperate survival instincts. "He is afraid," her wolf observed. "Good. Let him experience what we felt when he rejected us before the world." But as Cade circled wearily, searching for an opening that did not exist, Lyra felt something unexpected: pity. She recalled Celeste's journal, the entries detailing a man so terrified of vulnerability that he would rather destroy his own happiness than risk true revelation. She remembered Oracle Vera's pronouncements about power amplifying what lay within, and realized that what she felt was not vengeful rage or the lust for retribution. It was disappointment. Disappointment that someone with such potential had chosen fear over growth, that an alpha who could have been great had settled for being merely powerful, that her mate, the wolf the moon goddess herself had chosen for her, would rather end her life than confront his own emotional cowardice. Cade lunged again, and this time Lyra did not evade. She allowed him to tackle her, let his jaws close around her neck in what would have been a fatal bite against any ordinary wolf, but her transformed body was far from ordinary. His teeth could not penetrate her enhanced hide. She felt the pressure, but no pain, and the shocked confusion radiating from him was almost comical. "This is what you rejected," she projected through the pack bonds, knowing he could hear her even in his wolf form. "This power, this heritage, this connection, you cast it all aside because you were too afraid to be vulnerable." She tossed him off with minimal effort, rising to her full height so the entire arena could behold the massive silver blood wolf in all her terrifying glory. I could end you right now, she continued. Conclude this in seconds and claim everything you sought to deny me. Your territory, your resources, your pack. Cade struggled to rise, his wolf form battered and bleeding. But instead of attacking again, he did something that stunned all observers. He bowed his head in submission. The arena erupted in pandemonium. Alphas did not submit, especially not to rejected mates, and certainly not in public challenges witnessed by thousands. Yet there was Cade, the most formidable alpha in the Northern Territories, offering his throat to a wolf he had attempted to destroy less than a week prior. "Why?" Lyra demanded through their bond connection. She felt his response, raw with emotions he had spent a lifetime suppressing. "Because you were right about everything. I was so terrified of needing you that I convinced myself you were not worth having. Standing before you, witnessing what you have become, despite all my efforts to crush your spirit, I raised my head slightly, meeting your fiery gaze. I do not merit your leniency, yet I implore it nonetheless." Lara remained motionless, caught between the stark satisfaction of retribution and the tangled complexities of compassion. Her primal instinct craved vengeance, a desire to make him suffer for every indignity and torment endured. Yet her human heart recalled the intimate confessions within Celeste's journal, acknowledging that Cade, too, was a casualty of the prevailing order, albeit in a different fashion. He had been indoctrinated to perceive vulnerability as weakness, genuine connection as perilous, and an alpha's true measure as derived from might rather than empathy. She possessed the power to end him, a testament to the survival of the strong through the subjugation of the weak. Alternatively, she could spare him, thereby demonstrating that true fortitude lies in choosing mercy when the impulse for violence is overwhelming. "Rise!" she commanded, her voice resonating through their unspoken connection. "This conflict has concluded, but your life continues." Cade slowly stood, his wolfish form quivering with a potent blend of relief and profound shame. Lyra then transitioned back to her human guise, standing exposed beneath the moon's glow, an aura of potent energy emanating from her transformed being. Oracle Vera was already approaching, bearing garments. However, Lyra's voice cut through the hushed arena before she could conceal herself. "I, Lyra Silverblood, declare victory in this challenge through submission," she proclaimed. "As is my rightful prerogative under the ancient statutes, I claim restitution equivalent to what I would have secured through the mate bond." She paused, allowing the legal ramifications to permeate the awareness of the observers. "However," she continued, "I am also invoking my inherent right to negotiate the specific terms of that recompense with the vanquished party. Instead of seizing Cade's dominion outright, I propose an alternative arrangement." King Aldrich leaned forward in his royal enclosure, his interest clearly piqued by this unforeseen turn of events. "The northern territories shall be partitioned," Lyra elaborated. "Cade will retain authority over the primary regions and his established pack, but the borderlands, the areas where ostracized wolves and renegades presently struggle for survival, those shall become mine." She declared her intention to establish a new pack, a haven for wolves cast aside by the current societal structure, a place where an individual's value would not be dictated by their lineage or political affiliations, but by their conduct and character. The arena buzzed with gasps and murmurs of astonishment. She was, in essence, establishing a sanctuary for the marginalized members of the supernatural community, wielding the legal authority derived from her triumph over an alpha in direct combat. "Furthermore," she added, her voice rising above the growing clamor, "any alpha who henceforth rejects a true mate shall be obligated to provide equivalent compensation directly to the spurned individual. No more clandestine disappearances, no more convenient banishments, no more wolves discarded due to political inconvenience." She then faced King Aldrich directly. "These stipulations represent my formal claim for compensation. I trust you will uphold them, just as you pledged to honor the outcome of this confrontation." The venerable monarch remained silent for a considerable duration, his discerning gaze appraising her with a newfound respect. "The terms are unconventional," he conceded finally, "but legally sound under the ancient laws. Very well, Lyra Silverblood. Your claim is duly recognized. The borderlands of the Northern Territories are hereby bestowed upon you as sovereign domain, granting you full authority to institute pack law as you deem fit." He rose from his throne, his subsequent words carrying the undeniable weight of royal decree. "Let it be known throughout all werewolf territories that the Silverblood lineage has returned. And let it also be known that the laws pertaining to mate bonds and their repudiation have been revised to incorporate mandatory compensation. Any alpha who transgresses these tenets will answer to the crown." The assembly's response was divided: elation from the lower-ranking wolves, apprehension from the established alphas, and a discernible glimmer of hope from those who had themselves experienced rejection. Lyra donned the attire provided by Oracle Vera, acutely aware of the scrutiny of thousands of eyes upon her every movement. She had entered this arena anticipating her demise, yet instead she had forged something that held the potential to genuinely improve werewolf society, not an insignificant accomplishment for a discarded rogue. Her wolf emitted a contented purr. Cade reverted to his human form, appearing diminished and more vulnerable than she had ever observed him. He approached cautiously, his head bowed in a continued gesture of deference. "Lyra," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, "I know I have no right to ask this, but the mate bond, is there any possibility?" She sensed the lingering connection between them, still present despite the tumultuous events. The moon goddess's endowment had not been extinguished by repudiation or violence. It remained, awaiting their choice. "The bond endures," she stated deliberately. "But bonds necessitate trust, Cade, and presently I cannot rely on you not to discard me once more the moment it becomes politically advantageous." His countenance contorted with genuine anguish. "I understand. However," she continued, surprising even herself, "people can evolve. If you genuinely endeavor to become someone capable of authentic vulnerability, rather than merely enacting the role you believe an alpha should embody, perhaps we can revisit this discussion in a few years. It was not absolution, nor was it reconciliation, but it represented potential, which was more than either of them had a right to anticipate after all that had transpired." "I will earn it," Cade vowed. "However long it takes, I will prove I can be better than I was." "We shall see," Lyra responded with practiced neutrality. She turned away from him and from the arena. Oracle Vera fell into step beside her as they proceeded towards the exit. Behind them, the crowd was already dispersing, initiating thousands of conversations about the witnessed events and their potential implications for the future. "Quite an evening," Oracle Vera remarked to Lyra. "You have just reshaped werewolf politics, established a refuge for rejected wolves, and spared your adversary's life, though thoroughly humbled. Your grandmother would be proud." "Would she?" Lyra inquired. "She sought to rule through force. I am attempting to instigate change through legal reform and by setting a precedent." "Precisely," the elder werewolf smiled. "She attempted to salvage werewolf society by dominating it. You are striving to preserve it by demonstrating that mercy and strength are not mutually exclusive. It is a more subtle approach, but potentially more effective in the long run." They emerged from the arena into the crisp night air, and Lyra inhaled deeply, savoring the sensation of freedom. She was alive, she was potent. She possessed territory, legal acknowledgement, and the opportunity to construct something meaningful from the remnants of her rejection. And she had accomplished all of this without succumbing to the monstrous persona they had anticipated. Not a bad outcome for a week's endeavor, she mused. 3 months hence, the borderlands of the Northern Territories had undergone a metamorphosis Lyra could scarcely have envisioned. Where scattered, struggling rogue encampments had once existed, thriving settlements now stood. Where mere survival had been the sole objective, a sense of community had taken root. Rejected wolves from across the realm had sought sanctuary, and Lyra had embraced each one. Her pack had swelled to encompass nearly 200 wolves, outcasts, renegades, and those who simply did not conform to the conventional pack hierarchy. They were building something novel here, something that valued individuals for their contributions rather than their lineage. It was not without its challenges. Intermittent territorial disputes persisted with neighboring packs, and political pressure from alphas who resented the societal shifts she had necessitated continued to be a factor. Yet each day brought new wolves seeking refuge, fresh accounts of mates invoking their entitlement to compensation, and mounting evidence that the existing order was gradually transforming. Alina had visited the previous week, seeking an absolution Lyra was not yet prepared to grant. However, they had conversed, genuinely, for the first time in months. Perhaps someday their relationship could be mended into something authentic, or perhaps not. Regardless, Lyra was learning that her own resilience did not hinge on her adoptive mother's approval. Cade had maintained a respectful distance, diligently managing his own territory and reportedly treating his pack members with an unprecedented level of fairness. Lyra learned through Oracle Vera that he had commenced therapy with a supernatural counselor, actively addressing the emotional underpinnings that had fueled his pattern of rejection. Whether this would suffice to mend their mate bond remained uncertain, but at least he was making an effort. As for Lyra herself, she stood on the precipice overlooking her newly acquired domain, observing the sun dip below the horizon, casting its glow upon lands now belonging to her pack. Wolves who had once been rendered invisible were now constructing homes, forging lives, and shaping futures. "We accomplished it," her wolf declared contentedly. "We endured. We claimed our power and are utilizing it to aid others, rather than to subjugate them." "We did," Lyra agreed aloud, feeling the dual weight of responsibility and potential. She was Lyra Silverblood, the final descendant of the Moon's Crown lineage, and the alpha of the Borderlands pack. She possessed power beyond comprehension, legal recognition, and, at long last, validation for precisely who she chose to be. And in a world that had strived so assiduously to annihilate her, this might well have been her most profound triumph. If Lyra's transformative odyssey from rejected mate to formidable alpha has resonated with you, please subscribe to support the continuation of narratives that affirm your inherent worth, irrespective of those who underestimate you. Each subscription enables us to bring you compelling tales of wolves who resolutely refuse to remain unseen.